Hello, dear viewers. Today I invite you in for a thrilling blast from the past. We'll be revisiting the tales that terrorized our childhoods, a selection of classic creepypasta stories from the golden age of online horror. Whether you simply want a blast of nostalgia or something to drift off to sleep, I hope you'll enjoy the journey. So, without further ado, go ahead and grab yourself a nice warm drink and a blanket and get yourself comfortable, because it's time for a good old-fashioned campfire story. And who could forget our old friend, Jeff the Killer, the original story. Excerpt from a local newspaper: ominous unknown killer still at large. After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. "I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night," says the boy. "I saw that for some reason the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to go back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light illuminating from between my curtains, were a pair of eyes. These weren't regular eyes. They were dark and ominous. They were bordered in black and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth, a long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up. The figure stood there, just watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said in the way only someone who was mad could speak. He said, "Go to sleep." I let out a scream, and that's what set him at me. He pulled out a knife and aimed it for my heart. He jumped on top of my bed, and I fought him back. I kicked, punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off of me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. He might have come to finish him off, but the neighbors alerted the police. They pulled into the parking lot and ran towards our door. But the man, he turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash, like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing toward the back of my house was broken. I looked out to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing. I will never forget that face. Those cold, evil eyes, and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. Police are still on the lookout for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in the story, please contact your local police department. Jeff and his family had just moved into a new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother Lou couldn't complain, though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by. "Hello," she said. "I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you. Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and to introduce my sons." She turns around and calls her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Peter, and my two sons, Jeff and Lou." They each introduced themselves, and then Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to when he and his family were done packing. Jeff went up to his mom. "Ugh, Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid anymore." "Jeff," said his mother, "we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now, we're going to that party, and that is final." Jeff started to talk but stopped himself, knowing he couldn't do anything. Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there looking at his ceiling when suddenly he got a weird feeling. Not so much pain, but strange. He dismissed it as some random sort of emotion. He heard his mom call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and got ready for school. As he sat there eating his breakfast, he once again got that strange feeling. This time it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches from their laps. They both jumped back in surprise. "Hey, what the hell?" The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hand. The kid seemed to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wore an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans. Well, it looks like we got some new meat." Suddenly, 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny and the other was huge. "Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there is Keith." Jeff and Lou looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have. "And he's Troy." They looked over to the fat kid. Talk about a tub of lard. This kid looked like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling. "And I," said the first kid, "am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small price for bus fare, if you catch my drift." Lou stood up, ready to punch the lights out of the kid's eyes when one of his friends pulled a knife on him. "Tisk, tisk, tisk. I had hoped you would be more cooperative, but it seems that we must do this the hard way." The kid walked up to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff got that feeling again. Now it was truly strong, a burning sensation. He stood up, but Lou gestured him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet, or else." Randy put the wallet in his own pocket and pulled out his own knife. "Oh, and what will you do?" Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid right in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Randy screamed and Jeff grabbed the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He just punched Troy straight in the stomach and he went down. As he fell, he puked all over. Lou could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. "Jeff, how'd you—" That was all he said. They saw the bus coming and knew they'd be blamed for the whole thing. So they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Lou made it to school, they didn't dare tell what happened. All they did was sit and listen. Lou thought the incident was that of just his brother beating up a few kids. But Jeff, he knew it was more. There was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was. The urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help feeling happy about it. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away the entire rest of the school day. And in its absence, he just felt happy. Even as he walked home from school, knowing he likely couldn't take the school bus anymore, he still felt good. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he responded in a somewhat odd voice. "It was a wonderful day." "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't just regular fighting, that they were stabbed. Stabbed, son!" Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. "Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Lou." "Son," said one of the cops, "we found 3 kids. 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now, what does that tell us?" Jeff knew it was no use. He could honestly say that he and Lou had been attacked, but then there was no proof that it wasn't them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing because, truth be told, they were. So, Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou. "Son, call down your brother." Jeff couldn't bring himself to do it, since he was the one who beat up the kids. "Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The cop looked at his partner, and they both nodded. "Well, kid, looks like a year in juvie." "Wait," says Lou. They all looked up to see him holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Lou. "It was me. I beat up those little punks. I have the marks to prove it." He lifted his sleeve to reveal cuts and bruises as if he was in a struggle. "Son, just put down the knife," said the officer. Lou held the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the cops. "No, Lou, it was me. I did it." Jeff had tears running down his face. "Huh, poor little bro, trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away." The police led Lou out to the patrol car. "Lou, tell them it was me. Tell them I was the one who beat up those kids." Jeff's mother put her hands on his shoulders. "Jeff, please, you don't have to lie. We know it's Lou. You can stop." Jeff watched helplessly as the cop car sped off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled up into the driveway, seeing Jeff's face and knowing something was wrong. Son, what is it?" Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him, as Jeff continued to weep in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff finally walked back into the house, seeing that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't stand to see how they thought it was Lou who had done it all. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by with no word from Lou at the JDC. No friends to hang out with, nothing but sadness and guilt. That is, until Saturday, when Jeff was woken up by his mother with a happy, sunshiny face. "Jeff, it's the day," she said as she opened up the curtains to let the light flood into his room. What's today?" asked Jeff as he stirred awake. "Why, it's Billy's party." He was now fully awake. "Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party after..." There was a long pause. "Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be just the thing to brighten up the past few days. Now, go get dressed." Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to get ready herself. He fought to get himself up. He picked out a random shirt and a pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up, his mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He thought, why would they ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party? "Son, is that all you're going to wear?" said Jeff's mom. "Better than wearing too much," he said. His mother cringed and looked like she wanted to shout at him, but instead pushed the feeling down and smiled. "Now, Jeff, we may seem overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make a good impression," said his father. Jeff grunted and went back up to his room. "I don't have any fancy clothes," he yelled down the stairs. "Just pick something nice out," called his mother. He looked around his closet for what she might presume to be fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it, though. He looked around and found only striped and patterned shirts, none of which would go with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and decided to put it on. "You're wearing that?" they both said. His mother looked at her watch. "Oh, dear. Well, no time to change now. Let's just go," she said as she herded Jeff and his father out the door. They crossed the street over to Barbara and Billy's house, then knocked on the door and soon appeared Barbara. Just like his parents, she was also way overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults, no kids. "Oh, the kids are out in the yard. Jeff, how about you go and meet some of them?" said Barbara. Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly, a kid came up to him and handed him a toy gun and a hat. "Hey, wanna play?" he said. No, kid. I think I'm getting too old for this stuff." The kid looked at him with that sad little puppy dog face. "Please," said the kid. "Oh, fine," said Jeff. "Not like I got anything better to do." He put on the hat and started to pretend to shoot at the kids. At first, he felt completely ridiculous, but then he started to just let himself have fun. Sure, it wasn't super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off Lou. So he played with the kids for a while. That is, until he heard a noise. A strange, rolling sort of noise. Oh no. Randy, Troy, and Keith all hurtled around the fence on their skateboards. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred. "Oh, Jeff, is it?" he said. "I believe we have some unfinished business." Jeff saw his bruised nose. "I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you got my brother sent to juvie." Randy had an angry look in his eyes. "Oh no, I don't go for even, I go for winning. You may have whooped us that day, but not today." As he said that, Randy rushed at Jeff. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabbed him by the ears and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him, and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming, and parents began running out of the house. At this point, Troy pulled out his father's gun that he had stashed in his pocket. "No one interrupts, or guts will fly," he said. Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed it into his shoulder. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabbed his foot and twisted it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked toward the back door. Troy grabbed him. "Need some help?" He picked up Jeff by the back of the collar and threw him through the patio door. As Jeff tried to stand, he was kicked down to the ground once again, Randy repeatedly kicking Jeff until he began coughing up blood. "Come on, Jeff, fight me." He picked up Jeff and threw him into the kitchen. At this point, Randy saw a bottle of vodka on the counter and proceeded to smash the glass over Jeff's head, showering him with the liquid. "Come on, fight," he said as he threw Jeff back into the living room. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." At this point, Jeff glanced up, his face riddled with blood and glass shards. "I was the one who called the cops and got your brother sent to juvie, and now you have to just sit here and let him rot there for a whole year. You should be ashamed of yourself, you little coward." At this, Jeff started to get up. "Oh, you finally want to fight?" Jeff was now on his feet, blood and vodka all over his face. Once again, he felt that strange, malevolent feeling. "Finally," said Randy as he ran at Jeff. That's when it happened. Something inside of Jeff finally snapped. His psyche fell apart. All rational thinking was gone in a blink. At that point, all that was on his mind was to kill. And so, in the blink of an eye, he grabbed Randy and threw him to the ground. He climbed on top of him and began punching him in the chest. Jeff swung savagely, and after one well-placed punch directly to the heart, something happened. It seemed as though Randy had been set into cardiac arrest. Randy gasped hopelessly for breath, but Jeff ignored this and continued to hammer down on him. Punch after punch, blood was now gushing from Randy's body, until finally he released one last breath and dropped dead. Everyone was staring at Jeff now, the parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith. The stupor was quickly broken, though, as they pointed their guns at Jeff. In his mania, Jeff ignored this and ran for the stairs. While he ran, Troy and Keith both shot at him, both missing. Running up the stairs, he could hear Troy and Keith following closely behind. As they let out their final round of bullets, Jeff ducked into the bathroom. He grabbed a towel rack and ripped it off the wall. Troy and Keith raced in, this time knives at the ready. Troy charged in first, swinging his knife at Jeff, who backed away and swung the towel rack right into his face. Troy went down hard, and now all that was left was Keith. He was far more agile than Troy, though, and he ducked when Jeff swung the towel rack. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck. He pushed him into the wall. In the scuffle, a bottle of improperly closed bleach fell down on top of him from the shelf above. It burnt both of them, and they both started to scream. Jeff tried to wipe his eyes as best he could. He pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding, he suddenly let his lips curl into a wicked smile. "What are you grinning about?" asked Jeff. Then suddenly, Keith pulled out a lighter and flicked it on. What's funny? What's funny is that you're covered in alcohol, remember? Jeff's eyes widened in realization as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, they ignited with the alcohol from the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible scream as he caught fire. He tried to roll out the flames, but it was no use. The alcohol made him a walking inferno. He ran down the hall, then fell down the stairs. Everybody started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man of fire, drop to the ground, nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying desperately to extinguish the flames. That's when he passed out. When Jeff awoke, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulders as well, and stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up, but he realized that there was some sort of tube in his arm. When he tried to get up, it fell out, and a nurse rushed in. "Oh, honey, I don't think you can get out of bed just yet," she said as she put him back in the bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there with no vision, no idea of what his surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer, though. His face was covered and he was unable to speak. "Oh, honey, I have great news. After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed to trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go." This made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. "He'll be out by tomorrow, and then the two of you will be able to be together again." Jeff's mother hugged him and said her goodbyes. The next couple of weeks were those where Jeff was visited by his family. Then came the day where his bandages were finally able to be removed. His family were all there with him. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was almost removed. "Well now, let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulled the remainder of the cloth, letting it fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother couldn't help but whimper at the sight. Lou and Jeff's dad just staring, awestruck at his face. What happened to my face?" Jeff said as he rushed out of bed and ran into the bathroom. He gazed into the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face. Oh, it was horrible. His lips were burnt to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color, and his hair singed from silky brown to coarse, harsh black. Slowly, he lifted a hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. "Jeff," said Lou, "it's not that bad." "Not that bad?" said Jeff. "Actually, it's perfect." His family were quite surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably, and his parents noticed that his left eye and hand were beginning to twitch. "Jeff, are you okay? Honey, is he okay?" "Okay? I've actually never felt better. Look at me. This face goes perfectly with the new me." He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it. While Jeff's parents rushed to get a doctor, they didn't know what was going inside Jeff. You remember that strange little feeling, right? When he was fighting Randy? Well, it would seem that poor Jeff's psyche had finally completely snapped. What remained now was no longer the Jeff his parents knew. But unfortunately, they had no clue. "Doctor," started Jeff's mom, "will my son be all right mentally?" Oh yes, this behavior does seem to be typical for patients who have taken very large amounts of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here and we'll get him some psychological tests. Jeff's mother stared at him a bit skeptically. Well, if you're sure. Thank you, doctor. She then walked over back to Jeff's side. Well, Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go home. Jeff finally looked away from the mirror, his face still contorted into that strange smile. All right, Mommy. His mother took him by the shoulder and went to gather his clothes. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to the sound of something coming from the bathroom. It almost sounded like someone was crying. Slowly, she walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. While they had slept, Jeff had gotten a hold of a knife and had carved a smile into his cheeks. Jeff, what are you doing? His mother cried. Jeff looked over to her. Well, I couldn't keep smiling, Mommy. It started to hurt after a while. Like this, I can smile forever. Jeff's mother noticed his eyes now ringed in black. Jeff, your eyes! His eyes now looked charred, black and brittle, wide, round, and seemingly never closing. Well, I couldn't see my face. I got too tired and my eyes started to close. I burned out the eyelids so I could always see myself and my beautiful new face. Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was not stable. What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful? Sensing danger, she began backing away quicker. Yes, son, she said. Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy so he can see your face too. She then spun on her heels and ran back to her room, shaking her husband awake from his sleep. Honey, this is bad. You might need to get the gun. I don't know what's going to happen. She stopped suddenly when she saw Jeff in the doorway, holding the knife. Mommy, you're a liar. That's the last thing they heard as Jeff rushed them with the knife, gutting the two of them. Startled by some noise, his brother Lou woke up. He didn't hear anything else after the initial noise, so he tried to just shut his eyes and go back to sleep. As he was just on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. He slowly raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Lou. Lou thrashed here and there, trying to escape Jeff's grip. Shh, Jeff said. Just go to sleep. Eyeless Jack. Hello, my name is Mitch. I'm here to tell you guys about an experience I had. I don't know if it was paranormal or whatever stupid words people use to describe supernatural phenomena, but after that thing visited me, I believe in that paranormal trash now. A week after I moved in with my brother Edwin, after my house was foreclosed, I finished unpacking. Edwin liked the idea of me moving in, since we had not seen each other for 10 years, so I was excited too. I soon fell asleep after I moved in. After that first week, I heard rustling noises coming from outside at about 1 a.m. I thought it was a raccoon, so I ignored it and tried to fall asleep. The next morning, I told Edwin about it and he agreed. The next night, however, I thought I heard my window opening and a loud thump, as if something had entered my room. I darted up and looked around my room, but I saw nothing. The next morning, Edwin dropped his coffee cup when he saw me. He held up a nearby mirror and I saw myself. I had a large gash in my left cheek. After I was rushed to the hospital, my doctor told me that I must have been sleepwalking, but then showed me something that made my blood turn cold. He lifted up my shirt to reveal a sewn-up incision where my kidneys were. I stared into his eyes, mine widening. You somehow lost your left kidney last night, my doctor told me. We don't know how, though. Sorry, Mitch. The next night was my breaking point. Around midnight, I woke up to see a truly horrifying sight. I was staring face to face with a creature with a black hoodie and dark blue mask with no nose or mouth, staring down at me. The thing that scared me the most was that it had no eyes, just empty black sockets. The creature also had some black substance dripping from its sockets. I grabbed a camera from the nearby mantle and took a picture. Immediately after taking the shot, the creature lunged at me and tried to claw open my chest to get to my lungs. I stopped it by kicking it in the face. As I ran out of the room, I grabbed my wallet. I would need the money. I ran out of my brother's house into the night. I eventually ended up in the woods near Edwin's house and tripped on a rock. I fell unconscious and woke up in the hospital. My doctor, the same one who treated me before, entered the room. "Well, I have good news and bad news, Mitch," the doctor started. "The good news is that you had minor injuries and your parents are going to pick you up." I sighed with relief. "The bad news is that your brother has been killed by some thing. I'm really sorry." My parents took me back to Edwin's house to collect my remaining belongings, which I did. Upon entering my room, I was scared but remained calm. I grabbed my camera and then stopped dead in my tracks. In the hallway leading to my room, I saw Edwin's body and something small lying next to it. I retrieved it and then entered my parents' car, not mentioning Edwin's corpse. I looked at the thing I had picked up and nearly vomited. I was holding my own stolen, half-eaten kidney with some sort of black substance on it. The Rake. Taken from a Goodbye Letter, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once, I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again, I awoke and heard his voice, and I looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Lenny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. From a journal entry translated from Spanish, 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. Unintelligible text. From a mariner's log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake. From a witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip to Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him up in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. There, at the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, then crawled quickly into a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while. Just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he could hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. He did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believe to be accounts of the rake. None of them give any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits to the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I sleep. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. Smile.dog. I first met in person with Mary E. in the summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terrence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I was not a newsman, but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business, but at the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour, I sat with Terrence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I listened and took notes while he attempted fruitlessly to calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense, but fit with the pattern I was expecting. Though I couldn't see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not, her objections to speaking with me centered around an incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terrence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recall that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time, I could perhaps find another similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the sysop for a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992. When she first encountered smile.jpg, her life changed forever. She and Terrence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS. Though she is the only one who has spoken openly about the experience, the rest have remained anonymous, or are perhaps dead. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my burgeoning interest in web-based phenomena. Mary was the most often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as smile.dog. The being smile.jpg is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity toward such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people don't believe it exists other than as a rumor or hoax. It is unique because, though the entire phenomenon centers on a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly many photo-manipulated simulacra litter the web, showing up with the most frequency on sites such as the image board 4chan, particularly the X-focused paranormal subboard. It is suspected these are fake because they do not have the effect the true smile.jpg is believed to have, namely, the sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. This purported reaction in the viewer is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though depending on whom you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much out of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock sites as Redacted and Redacted. Any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is similarly deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are the stuff of internet legend. Mary E.'s story is not unique. There are unverified rumors of smile.jpg showing up in the early days of Usenet, and even one persistent tale that in 2002, a hacker flooded the forums of humor and satire website Something Awful with a deluge of smile dog pictures, rendering almost half the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s that smile.jpg circulated on Usenet and has an attachment of a chain email with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." Yet despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link has ever been discovered. To those who claim to have seen smile.jpg, often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drive. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing something similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of the camera, sits in a dim room. The only background detail that is visible being a human hand extending from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but is usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog, or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the time they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue interminably, often while the victims sleep, resulting in very vivid and disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though some are more effective than others. Mary E., I assumed, was not on the effective medication. That was why after my visit to her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers to several folklore and urban legend-oriented news groups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of smile.jpg, who felt more interested in talking about his experiences. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits, since I had begun my freshman year of college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. The email goes as follows: Mary E. at redacted.net. Subject: Last summer's interview. Dear Mr. L., I am incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realized that I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years, I have been haunted by smile.jpg. Smile.dog comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that sounds silly, but it's true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that make them completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move and do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see Smile.dog. It talks to me. It's not a dog, of course, though I'm not quite sure what it really is. It tells me it will leave me alone if only I do what it asks. All I must do, it says, is spread the word. That is how it phrases its demands, and I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else. And I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a coworker. I could even show it to Terrence. As much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, if Smile.dog kept its word, I could sleep. Yet, if it lied, what would I do? And who was to say something worse would not come for me if I did as the creature asked? So, I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years, I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board where I first encountered smile.jpg stopped posting. I heard some of them ended their lives. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They're the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L., but last summer when you contacted me and my husband about an interview, I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.dog was lying or not. I just wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connection with. And I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as a part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought, and I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L., and I hope that this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow smile.dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terrence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had ended her life. While cleaning up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. The man was in shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He'd found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette had hissed as it melted, like some sort of animal, he said. I will admit, I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first, I thought perhaps it was a joke, the couple belatedly playing the situation in order to get a rise out of me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of her having ended her own life in the article. I decided that, for a time at least, I would not further pursue the subject of smile.jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has odd ways of testing us. Almost a full year after I'd returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. From ElzaHer82 at redacted.com. Subject: Smile. Hello. I found your email address through a mailing list and your profile said you're interested in smile.dog. I have saw it and it is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you here. Just spreading the word, smiley. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attachment called, naturally, smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was most likely a fake, I imagined, and even if it weren't, I was never wholly convinced of smile.jpg's peculiar powers. Mary E.'s account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. After all, how could a simple image do what smile.jpg was said to accomplish? What sort of creature was it that could break into one's mind with only the power of the eye? And if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? And if I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about smile.jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence, and anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming the smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes. Yes, I could. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me around the campfire tonight. I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane. And if it's all new to you, I do hope you had a scary fun time. I'll be back real soon with more classic creepypasta tales. If you've got any particular you're dying to hear, be sure to comment below. But that's all for now. And remember, until next time, stay creepy.